The Enigma machine first hit the stage somewhere around like 1700 to 1800. It was new somewhere around there, maybe even 1500 when it was new. Um, it had to do with something with the transmitting of the messages. I forget what it was. And eventually, like I say, we went to digital transmissions. I think it has to do with the old telegraph system or something like that, and the way it looked. Like we had telegraphed different letters and stuff. I mean, the whole alphabet is really my invention anyway. And there should be Enigma machines with different other symbols. Like China had their own little Enigma machine with their own little, like they have 5,000 characters to choose from. And those 5,000 characters were built up over 150 years. In many ways, the Chinese characters are much like the Enigma machine, where there's three different sets, and they basically, like the first set, then later on they made another set, and then another one, they made another set. And the Chinese language is very much unbreakable. Um, Nobody ever really got into China or could understand the Chinese written language. Like they had to actually like torture or actually like get a Chinese to willingly say what the characters were. And the Chinese language is a very, very old language, at least 500 years old. Um, and I forget how it works, but basically the whole language, their written language is basically like one big Enigma machine. Anyway, I love the Chinese, and I always respected, had the greatest respect for them. Like I say, I adored them actually. I did love them a lot, and I tried to protect them as much as I could. And I shouldn't have actually ordered the nuking of them, but like I say, I was lied to. But then they knew I was going to be lied to, so like they came to me a long time ago and they said, "You will think that it is us, but it is not." And unfortunately, it was after the fact that I had actually ordered it. But then again, it had already happened, and realistically, it happened by somebody else. So in many ways, I didn't actually nuke them. I just later on gave orders for what they had already done. So anyway, realistically, I was on their side the whole time. Like I said, I was the one who actually helped them get the aircraft plants. Like I said, I funded the what's called the water treatment facility that they have, and the other stuff. The water treatment facility where they studied water treatment and everything else, and the hospital that was in China. I was the one who built that and funded it, and it was actually pretty old when later on. Like I said, the Enigma machine was actually like from 1700s. Like most people who knew about the Enigma machine would know that it was actually a class that was taught in Germany. It was like third generation. Like you had to go to school for at least a year or 6 months or something, like just to understand. I mean, the workings of a submarine and the workings of a communication system. That's a whole class. That's like that's like at least 3 months worth of school, or like 5 months worth of school, because you understand. Because by the time you're done, you understand like how the codes work, how they interface with the code system, and also about the codes and also communication systems. It's a whole big thing, you know. I mean, it's like 3 years or something like that. Anyway, I would wait. Like people would have to be in my military for at least 15 years before I would ever let them in to get at the good stuff. Like I said, by the time the world knew about the gas-driven submarines or diesel-driven submarines, like they were 150 years old at least. Like they came out in like 1800 about. Like anybody in the military who really knows anything would tell you that the subs were 80 to 150 years old before there were any amount of them. I had built like two or three originally, and like I said, all the white ships were all painted white. And they're all very nice. Like most people, a lot of people knew my ships. And it really wasn't until um, 1930 or so that I started selling them to civilian use or private use, or 19 something basically. But pretty much the military I had the submarines for 80 years at least. Like the Enigma machine was old and sitting inside of a school in Germany. Like it was in a big glass case. And they broke into the school to steal it so they could get the Enigma machine. But the machine wouldn't do you any good unless you knew the codes. And the codes were transmitted, it was part of the Enigma. They would just type in the thing. So, like, you'd have to know the current code to even get to know the new code. So it really didn't do them a lot of good, and all the old codes were all put inside of a book, and actually a written book, and it was part of the class. You could go and look at and see what old codes were, and then you could understand. It was part of learning how to understand and use the machine. And like 1850 or so, it was new for a while, and we wouldn't have let anyone have it back then. But then by the time like 1900 and 1930 rolled around, it was old. It was really old, and more like a museum piece. I think we actually just had. I think we had them inside of the trading school subs, basically. Um, the civilian. If you bought a civilian use sub, you wouldn't get those. You wouldn't get an Enigma machine, nor would you know how to use it because you were just a civilian person just jumping inside of a sub. But for civilian use, you didn't get code machines at all, or anything, or any kind of code thing. You just got a normal radio, just like today. And so, like the Enigma machine might actually be something new to the kids that were down there that picked it up out of the sub, but to anyone that was in the military or actually in communications, it was old. It was really old, and that's why I was like, whatever. I don't really care. And they probably got one a lot sooner than that. A lot sooner than 1930. They probably got one back in like 1920 or something like that. Like I say, they were very old, and it was sitting inside the school. You could go to school, and if you spent like I think it was $350 without books or something like that, and then or with books, and then room and board was like $480 or something like that. You'd stay at the college. You could stay at the college and go to school there or something like that. There's a nice college, and I think there was a car provided for you if you paid the full amount to go into to do the communications class and all that. And then you could serve on one of the submarines, and then if you kept with it, you could serve on one of the submarines. And then once you served on a submarine for a while, you'd upgrade. I'd promote people. Basically, you served on one submarine for a year, and then you would serve on another submarine for a year, and that was all within the school. The school it was a 2 or 3 year course where you served on one submarine, and then you served on another submarine, and I think there was a third submarine that they added later on. Basically, as my military got outdated or old, I would just move everything down. So there was the school submarines, which were still, they were old military, and then there was what's called, which was still old military, like 3 different levels, and then there was the current military, or my group, which is basically nuclear and all the big cool submarines. All the cool stuff was all me and paid for and very expensive. And then there was all the school stuff, and the school stuff still did patrol, still did stuff, and stuff like that, but they weren't really like update or current. They burned fuel and this and that, and part of the cost of going to the school was actually the fuel itself to run the subs. So anyway, it was kind of like a business a little bit, but not really. Mostly it was training for what they would be doing for the rest of their lives, which is basically protecting convoys, truth, honor, duty, all that stuff. So that was like 1700 to 1800 and 1900, basically. So we all knew what was going on, but no, the civilian population, they didn't really know. So, hey. Anyway, though, there's a big difference between stealing stuff and getting stuff and actually inventing it yourself. When you invent it, you know when it happens, and you know when it's new. But when you just happen to be taking stuff and stealing stuff and killing people to get stuff, well, then you don't really know when it really came out. You might find something and say, oh, this is new. And it's like, no, that's actually like 80 years old, 150 about. I don't know, some distant time ago.